We're live.
Awesome. Let's see here. Hi, everybody. How's it going?
Great. Early morning.
Early morning.
Yeah.
On the West Coast.
Hey, everybody.
Hey, Luca.
Right.
I think what would be a really good quick thing to do would be just to say hello, your name, and who you are. And then we can get going with the issues list. I'll start. I'm Ben. I am in the Portland, Oregon area. I just got hired at Envision, so that's cool. And yeah, and I do developer advocacy stuff and work with Node stuff, and I'm really, really excited about internationalization. I'm stoked to be here with you. Dhruv, do you want to go next?
Hey, hi, I am Dhruv. I am a student from India, so like the opposite end of all of you. It is a great night here. After all, after actually about 18 and 20 hours, we are turning on our internets here. Like the whole country is closed for a day. I don't know why the internet is also turned off for about a day here.
Wow.
So great to find the internet on after so long.
Wow.
I'll go next. Hi, I'm Zeke.
Awesome.
I'm in the Los Angeles area. I work for GitHub. I'm on the Electron team as an engineer, where I mostly work on internationalization these days, documentation stuff. Yeah, happy to be here. Happy to see more people on the call.
Woohoo.
How about you? I'm going to pick a name that I can pronounce. Andre.
Hello. This is Andrew. No, I don't know how can I turn on my video. So I'm from Crowdin team. Yes, and I'm today to collect any feedback, share some ideas, advices, if that would be possible. Yes, this is why I'm here.
Awesome. Thanks, Andre. Tierney, you want to go next?
Sure. I'm Tierney Siren. I'm a developer advocate at NodeSource, and I'm chairperson, I said it right, of the community committee. Who hasn't gone yet? Ben? Tiriel?
He may not be able to.
Oh, yeah, he can't talk. That's right. Forgot.
Yeah. I think he's introducing himself via the chat.
I can read that off. He said, hey, everyone, I'm Ben, developer, PHP, Node.js, in an agency in Paris, very interested in internationalization, also ComCom member.
Woo. The last person, I think, and please, I'm probably going to say this wrong, is Wexpo.
Hi, everyone. I'm Wexpo Liu. I'm from China, now in China. And I'm a college student now, and I'm quite interested in localization. That's all.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us. Really glad you're here. Okay, great. Well, thank you all for introducing yourselves. It's really exciting, as Zeke said, that more people are here and we're all active. This is great. I think we
have Luca. Did Luca get a chance?
Sorry. Yes.
My apologies.
No problem. Hi, I'm Łukasz from Poland. I'm currently Node.js developer. And yeah, this is the first time I have possibility to contribute to open source to Node.js, and I'm interested in internationalization. So I hope I could help somehow with this project going.
Awesome. I'm so glad you're here, man. It's really thank you for your contributions too in the repo, and it's been exciting to see you more and more active.
Yeah, cool.
So thanks for being here. How do you pronounce your name again? Łukasz?
Łukasz.
Łukasz. Oh,
it could be in English Luke.
Luke. Okay, cool. Right on. Well, thanks. I just want to make sure that I can get that as closely as possible. Thanks. Great. Well, awesome. There we go. We didn't miss anybody else? No, I don't think so. Okay, cool. Let's move on to our issues here. I started by earliest date on our issues here with the localization group audit. I think that let's open that up here. I think that we're at a point where we've gathered enough information with the audit to actually do the audit. Richard Litt has done a bit of background work. Lukasz has done a bit of back work for this and found the necessary localization groups to reach out to, who's somewhat active. And then on top of that, there were just a couple other things. I think, Ben Tiriel mentioned that we might need to look into activity that happened only within certain Node.js endeavors and not actually within the internationalization repo to field more people who might be interested in helping for various localization efforts. So I think if we take one quick glance at that and then we're able to and then can build a a markdown document that we can share with the localization teams and a getting started type document. I think we should be good to go to start to get people involved and help them figure out where they can go. Because we've had a lot of people chiming in. I mean, not a lot, but maybe 4 or 5 issues where people are saying, hey, I can contribute this and I can contribute that. And we're just needing a way to plug them in, get them going. So anyways, yeah, localization should be kicking off more this week. I feel like, the audit should be kicking off more this week and we'll see more activity with that. And then the working group meeting time and frequency. This is a really important one. Obviously, we like had a little bit of confusion about working group meetings happening and not happening, and they haven't really been happening. But now we're here, so this is great. So I think as long as we can within that issue nail down a time that works both on the is it CST and EST? I think are the timeframes. UTC, sorry, well, something that works on both sides of the world, essentially. We'll be able to oscillate between those times each week for our working group meetings or if, whatever frequency we decide. So anyways, this is really important. We need to nail this down so we have an ongoing meeting that is relevant and working for everybody. And if we can nail down a time that works within both of those contexts for PST and CET, I think we will be fine. So there's that. If anybody does anybody have any thoughts on that?
I'm pretty flexible with any time. So, even though 7 is early for me, I can totally make it. So just, I guess, put me down for whatever. I'll do whatever works.
Awesome. I'm in the same boat. Awesome.
For me, everything is working too.
Okay. Yeah, I think the hope here is just to make it easier for people in both time regions. So cool. Anyone else have thoughts on that? Nope. Okay.
I guess I wonder how we're going to reach consensus on that. So are you expecting that existing issue are you going to kind of make a final proposal there and then we'll just see if there's any resistance to it?
Yeah, I think so. I think okay. To me, at the point, it just comes down to like picking a couple of times. And then if I get resistance and don't get like consensus for it, I'll just, then we can talk about that. But I'm hoping that it'll be fine.
Cool.
Yeah, sweet. So on number 48, I was hoping this might be something that Rio might be here to talk about, and we might save it for later. There's going to be a lot of thoughts about this, but it was the problems found in Electron from a standpoint of one translator proofreader. Is this something y'all would like to talk about now or shelve until a later meeting?
I can talk a little bit about some of the developments in that area that have happened since this conversation kicked off.
Yeah, awesome.
So I think the main things were like, well, just to cover the top headings from that issue. No rule for localization. Some terms should not be translated. Lack of communication between translators, and at least 2 active proofreaders are needed per language. So I can comment on the last 3 there. So some terms should not be translated, and this is entirely true. The TLDR with what we ended up doing with Electron was, in our first go around, we tried to decontextualize all the markdown so that the stuff that we were feeding into Crowdin was only the strings that we wanted translated, without the things like method names and module names and stuff like that. But there was immediate protest from the translators because without the context of the larger document, they didn't really know how to translate the individual strings. So we decided, okay, we're just going to put all the markdown into Crowdin and deal with the fact that we're exposing some strings that ideally should not be translated. The 2 ways that we're currently dealing with that in Electron are, we've created an automated glossary, and I'm thinking it would be useful to generalize this so that we could also use it on Node.js. The glossary is essentially go through all of the built-ins in JavaScript, the default data types, array, Boolean, things like that, and add a glossary entry that says, hey, this is probably something you don't want to translate, so that when people are in the translation editor in context, they'll see a little tooltip that suggests maybe you don't want to translate this. So that's one step. The other is promoting more translators to proofreader status. And we recently had someone who contributed some clarifying documentation on Electron around the proper protocol for promoting people to proofreader status. What we were doing before is just doing blanket promotion. So if people proved themselves to be good contributors to the project, then we would give them proofreader status. And someone said, hey, wait, you're actually doing that for every language. So now what we're doing is actually promoting people to proofreader for a single language at a time. So it's a more granular doling out of those permissions. So the more proofreaders we can get on each individual language, the more we are able to deal with these little minor issues where people are translating the wrong thing. I'm going to leave it at that so as not to go on and on about this particular topic, but things are developing.
Yeah, that's awesome. I feel like there was another issue that was related to that as well. I can't remember what it is at the moment where we were discussing. I had one quick question. Do you think just either way it would be not ideal, but it would be good to, instead of maintaining a glossary, what about like maintaining like flags on certain words within the markdown document?
I will let Andre speak to that. We talked about the possibility of having a Crowdin implement a custom markdown parser for us that would identify things like code blocks and just completely lock them down.
Right.
But then we thought that there are actually instances where code blocks should be allowed to be translated. Like if they have comments in them, like code comments, then those actually should be translatable. So we decided to put the brakes on that. And also we didn't want to have we basically didn't want to have a custom Crowdin parser on Electron, especially knowing that Node was probably going to be following suit. So We wanted to kind of stick with the vanilla. But Andre, can you comment to that if there are some special techniques for locking down pieces of content in Markdown files?
Well, currently, yes, as you described, it is quite possible for us to highlight some parts, make them highlight with green color and tell to translators you shouldn't translate it. But yes, it may not be very effective all the time. Sometimes some strings, some parts of this code, comments, for example, translators might prefer to translate them, but they will be locked. No way to submit translation. And I'm also afraid there might be some exceptions. Who knows, probably some parts of your text code is more complicated, so Crowdin won't be able to handle it properly. It's just assumption, but seems right now everything is highlighted fine. So for now, glossary might be the best idea. How can we help? We can even scan your project. You already have something, code, parts with code in your Markdown files are, they are surrounded with 3 quotes, if I'm not mistaken, yes. So we know what is the code, what is not the code. So what we can do, we can scan your files for such code parts, and based on this, create some kind of glossary for you. So these long parts of code will already become glossary terms. So for translators, they will be highlighted in Crowdin. And translators will totally understand that this part shouldn't be translated. But if translators decide to translate them, system won't block this. So translators, if necessary, translators will be able to add their own suggestion of this phrase.
That's awesome.
Yes, it's the least we can do. And it should be quite possible for us to generate such glossary.
That's rad. Yeah, I guess I personally was just imagining like there being some kind of noticeable flag like that these would be these words are highlighted like within the text. That's awesome. So really happy to hear that, Andre. Thanks.
There are also comments for strings. So, but no, it won't work. Somehow automatically or using some kind of script on our end, we can leave comments for string with code and tell to translator as a comment. There is a code part in this phrase, please be careful, but it won't be super effective. Probably glossary is better, should work much better.
Definitely. Yeah, or it might get noisy with the comments. That's awesome. Thanks, Andre. Great. I think we can move on. Does anyone have any more thoughts about this?
I can give a very quick screen share just to show the current glossary situation.
Yeah.
So if you're in the Crowdin editor, and you see, for example, here I have clicked on exit code integer. So integer is underlined here, and this is an example of the glossary entry showing up. So we're using kind of passive wording here. It should usually not be translated because there's no like definite thing. Like in some cases, the integer probably should be translated. But also you see exit code is wrapped in this code block, which doesn't make it not translatable, but it is kind of a signal to the translator that it is like something in code. But you'll see actually here we are in French. This is a mistake here. So event has been translated to événement, which is should still be event, even though it's in French. Like it's a tempting thing for a person to be translating and see the word event and know how to translate it into their language, but it's still actually a JavaScript event. So this is a case where our glossary entry didn't do the job that was intended to do. Although this translation may have happened, actually, yeah, it looks like it was translated. This may have actually happened automatically when we were experimenting with machine translation. So here, our loyal French translator Tuanan gave the correct translation, so we can actually promote this, and it'll go back to the right thing. But that's an example where humans have to kind of step in to clean up the mess of something being improperly translated.
That's awesome. Thanks for the demo.
Sure.
Right on. It's super cool to see it like being used so in such a slick way too. Thanks for sharing that. Okay, so we should move back to, why am I in full screen? So we need to get back to the issues here. Sorry, I'm experiencing some technical difficulties. There we go. All right, great. Thanks, Zeke. Does anybody have any more thoughts on
that? Ben is
Okay,
saying something in the chat here.
He was just saying he's helping out with the minutes.
Okay, sweet.
Awesome. Thank you, Ben.
Okay, Zeke. Hey, Zeke.
Hi.
Actually, I wanted to know if there is some method or some way that we can exclude these keywords or some words from Crowdin to translate them. Like for Hindi, actually, like so some simple keywords from JavaScript or any other thing that need not to be translated are like very indiscriminately translated to Hindi that doesn't have any meaning or semantical meaning with the statement. Like if there is some way we can exclude from Crowdin translation.
Yeah, so that's kind of what we were just talking about. It seems that there is no perfect answer to this problem right now, and I think that the best thing that we have is a combination of peppering all of the content with glossary entries and promoting proofreaders to help clear up the problems as they come, and perhaps also doing our best to try to educate incoming translators so that they know what to translate and what not to translate. So one of the ways we've tried to solve this is by, on the Electron project, is by moving sort of a TLDR short list of things to do and not to do to the top of the project description on the Crowdin page. So if you go to crowdin.com/project/electron, there's like a bulleted list of like, hey, stuff you need to know. And unfortunately, like still, even though it's like on the top of the Crowdin page, people are still probably not going to read it. They're just going to jump into translation. We also have it on the repository at the top as well, but it doesn't necessarily get read by everyone. So we're trying all these sort of countermeasures to try and solve that problem. But I don't think that currently Crowdin provides a way for us to specifically lock down that content. And if they do, then it's going to be in a way that it's not going to be a perfect solution, because we may be locking down things that we actually need to be open in certain contexts. So we're still iterating on the problem is the shortest answer I can give.
I also think in having like checkpoints, kind of what you were getting at too, like yeah, definitely having that described at the top in Crowdin, but also like describing that process within like a getting started document as people are flowing into that process, just continuing to get it on their radar as they go in. I think will be really good if we can just say like, make it apparent that it's a thing. Okay, great. Any more questions about this issue?
So I just had a kind of a wild idea. We could actually make the glossary itself could be localized. So I'm going to share my screen quickly again. So here we are in Hindi on the Electron project. Hindi has not been very actively translated yet. But if you hover over the object string here, you see that it there is an entry here for in the glossary. But we could actually put these strings into the Crowdin project itself and have them translated in all the different languages. So when you hovered over object as a Hindi translator, you'd see a message in Hindi that says, don't translate object. That could be like one small step towards improvement. It might also complicate things, but just a thought that popped into my head just now.
I mean, if people are able to do that, that would be amazing. I think Andre had something to say.
Yes, I have a very quick addition here. And I have found a button to activate my video, finally. Yes, in the project setting, when you go to the project settings and switch to glossaries, there is translate glossary option. So you don't need to upload any additional files to Crowdin, but instead you can just activate this option. There will be glossary file created in Crowdin in your project automatically. Your translators translate this glossary, and these translated terms will be shown to others during translation. So no need to create some files.
Awesome.
And everything will be synchronized. So
if we have if we're using the API to upload our English glossary, one thing that I've been doing is deleting the entire glossary and then running the script to re-upload it. Would we lose all of our translations in that case?
You already have some file in your project with glossary terms and translations.
It's not a file. So we use a script that actually uploads terms to the API. So when I first started working on this, we had a glossary of kind of random terms submitted by translators that were not very helpful. So I deleted them all, and we now have this automated process for generating the glossary. So what I'm wondering is if we're using the API to generate our glossary, will the translations of those strings remain in the translation memory, or will they be lost?
I think, yes, they should. And when you generate a glossary, in which file type it is generated? Or
it's like the CSV file that gets posted to the API.
I see. And then you upload this glossary to Crowdin, to your project.
Yeah. We can do it. We can do an experiment. We don't have to hash it out on this call, but yeah, we should try that.
Yep. I strongly recommend to activate that translate glossary option. It should make the process much more easier and safe.
Okay, if you can send us a link to that in the chat, like to a doc about it, or
first,
that'd be great.
1 second. Here, and I will need to modify it now. Yep, this one.
Awesome.
Only user can access it because it requires manager permissions.
I see it. Thank you.
Sweet. Thanks for that, Andre. Any more thoughts before we move on to other topics? Okay. Well, the next one on the list is something that was given by Laurent. I'm probably saying that wrong, but it was about key-based internationalization versus default language internationalization. And this is a relatively interesting one. I think Zeke also had some good thoughts on this, and so did Stephen. But essentially, not everything can and probably should be translated from a default language like English, like pushing everything into Crowdin, all of our documents as English as the base language, and then having everybody just translate, wholesale from there. There are translations that would be better off in a localized language. And that wouldn't make sense to necessarily just translate directly from English. And this issue is number 50, trying to describe ways that we can handle that within our translation scheme, and how we can isolate strings that should be localized before they're translated into English or whatever language, and how we can separate those and isolate those and then have those translated, not from English, but to other languages that have been localized in this way. So yeah, so there's some interesting discussion going on here between ways we could do that. Zeke had mentioned some ideas that he might want to talk about on how they handle this in Electron. And yeah, do you have any thoughts on that, Zeke?
I'm not actually sure I understand the nature of this particular issue. I can say that on the website, we just sort of, in order to internationalize the website, we just took a structured file and started extracting English strings from the website and kind of arbitrarily creating keys for them. So it's been a very unscientific process. Like, okay, here's the nav, let's call it nav, and then we'll have the structure underneath it called nav.apps and nav.docs and nav.support or whatever. And then of course we chose English for those strings, but it's kind of funny, like sometimes you'll be somewhere choosing some string that you want to create a key for, and it's kind of like, should the key just be like a lowercase version of the actual English string with like underscores? It's sort of just like, okay, whatever. And like, it hasn't felt great, but we also haven't had any problems with it. We did end up adding something to our test suite that makes sure that for every key, for every value in the YAML file, it's used somewhere in some template. And conversely, for every reference to a key in the templates, there is a value in the YAML file. Because we found that sometimes we would sort of go off the rails and we'd have like these strings that were in the file that weren't being used anywhere in any of our templates. So now we have this automated test for checking that. But as far as the original source question here about choosing different source languages for keys and stuff, I don't actually understand I'd like to know if there's a specific use case or a specific scenario where this is like an issue.
Yeah, I think I might be conflating it a little bit, but it did like bring up ideas about like for us for the first time in the repository about source language versus do we have a source language? Do we want a source language? Are we going to just translate everything from English? That sort of thing. But yeah, I think this one may need a little more input from Laurent or other folks who give more definition to that. And yeah, we don't need to have on it right now if it's not defined enough.
Yeah, I just want to say for the record, I am interested in this concept, and I do think that there is certainly the potential for, like, there was somebody said somewhere in the comments, like, who's to say that someone couldn't provide a better sort of original document in another language? And I think that is an idea worth entertaining. I just don't know a practical way to address it. Yeah,
definitely. That's what got me too, was seeing that there were people who were interested, were like, yeah, I mean, English won't be the best way to translate everything. So like,
Right.
yeah, I think it's something that we should definitely, if we can, we should address it in a meaningful way up front, so we don't have to like, retrofit things or whatever later on, because it's definitely like a fundamental important thing. So I would say if anyone is interested in this conversation, you should definitely chime in on this issue and give us your perspective. It's really valuable, especially if it's something that we're going to consider, like the what is our source language and how are we going to handle that. So please do jump in if you can. Moving on, any thoughts? Nope. Okay. All right. The next one, let's see. Keybase requires status checks for and reviews before PRs can be merged. This is a fairly simple one. If it will load for me, my internet is terrible here. Okay. Yeah, basically we want to protect our branches. Yeah, so pretty simple. We're trying to create rules around like, how many people can approve, or like we need approval before we merge something. We don't want to just merge something. We want to give like enough time for people to review and that sort of thing. I don't know. Does anybody have thoughts on this?
So I just wanted to say that the sort of backstory here was that Vanessa, my colleague, and I opened the first pull request on this PR that contained code and contained a sort of an opinionated step forward in how we would actually start structuring the source content. And we had a friendly contributor come in and approve the PR and merge it. And I wanted more eyes on it before we did that. So this is sort of, I wanted to put this in place so that we have some kind of protection, so that we know that more members of our community are actually able to see things before they just get shipped. I will say, however, though, that the 2 reviewer requirement, we should think of that as being something flexible. And if it turns out to be frustrating for some reason to have to be like, we need to bring in a third person just to like say, okay, let's be open to the idea of changing it. So I think a handful of us now have access to the settings on this repo. So we're definitely open to alternative ways of protecting the branches. We don't want this to like hinder progress. We just want to make sure that people have a chance to weigh in before we push stuff live.
Totally. Great. I think that's great. Any thoughts before moving on from this one? Nope. Okay. Next one is number 58, continuous integration. And Zeke and Vanessa have introduced code into our repository. That's awesome. They're great. People are doing rad work. We have an MIT license now because we have code here. This is great. So we need to consider CI and all the things that are going to come with that. And I think in this issue, if we can discuss, I don't necessarily know if we need to discuss like broadly like what we want going into the CI here right now, because there's probably quite a bit and will be stacked over time. But anyone have general thoughts on what they'd like to see in our CI process and that sort of thing?
This is a totally basic thing that is kind of tangential to i18n. But one thing I've noticed is links, just link checking for 404s, because that's across our normal site. It's hard enough. We have a ton of broken links in the docs. So managing that across internationalization is also going to probably be equally as hard. So if making sure we have link checking for 404s and other errors is probably going to be super useful.
Yeah, that's a great point. And actually, I'm going to drop an issue. I'm going to drop a link here in the chat to an issue that came up yesterday, which is kind of a security vulnerability or a spam opening in our current setup on Electron. So somebody noticed that one of the URLs in the docs was translated from atom.io to
atom.hack.world.
atom.hack.world. So that just went by. Nobody noticed it. That's been kind of our flow on Electron, is like, hope for the best. But I mentioned in the issue here that we should just have a part of our CI process, our automated test should just say, look through the list of URLs in the links for every doc and make sure that the translated docs have the same URLs, or at least like the same host names or something, right? So yeah, this hadn't occurred to me, but this is definitely an avenue, or a spot where we could be spammers could take advantage. So
and it's also a really good way to build false SEO. Like the Node.js site has super high PageRank, so it's a very good target for that. Yeah.
So hopefully before we get to the point where we're publishing localized Node docs, we will have solved this problem on Electron, and we'll do it in a way where hopefully we can share the solution to this problem.
Awesome. Thanks, man.
Also, URL checking, we do it on the Electron website tests, but we don't do it on the actual i18n content. So yes, it's super important. But I think we're doing it in a different spot in the stack or whatever. So it may not be portable.
Nice. Cool.
As far as CI goes, I opened an issue on the build repo, and Rodbag commented with some instructions there, and I haven't followed up. And I think anyone is welcome to take the lead on that.
Rad. Yeah, I saw that too. I was interested in that too. Cool. Any other thoughts on CI before we move on? No? Okay, then we're going to move to number 60, which is Crowdin modules org. And I haven't had a ton of, don't have a lot of context for this. I didn't move into it. This was something that Zeke created. Would you also like to talk about that, Zeke?
Yeah, so just briefly, this org consists of a couple of modules that we've created to work around some issues that we've had with the Crowdin API. Specifically, we wanted to make a way so that when you're viewing, let's say you're in Indonesian language and you're viewing the Node docs for the FS module, and you want to get to the bottom of the page and just click like translate this doc in Indonesian, there are a few pieces of that puzzle that are difficult to get. One is Crowdin's sort of internal ID for file names, and then Crowdin also has a non-standard language code that they use in their editor to identify the target translation language. So the combination of these two things is needed to generate a URL to jump straight from website to editor. And so these modules exist in this org, but in an ideal world, and I know Andre is aware of this and the Crowdin team is aware of this, in an ideal world, we'll just have an alternative URL structure where we can pass in 2 query params and be done with it, and these modules can die. But if there are other things where we have common needs between Electron and Node.js that are Crowdin related, we can put those modules here.
Awesome. Rad, any thoughts? Okay, cool. Well, let's move on to 61. Thanks, Zeke. File structure in Crowdin.yaml. think this is, we don't really need to spend much time on this, but it's talking about what directory structure we want for our content. Does anyone have thoughts on that?
There is a PR open for this from, was it Tiago? No, Madru.
Madru, yeah.
So this has been approved. Kind of wanted Andre to give a thumbs up on that, just to make sure that it's gonna. Andre, if you could take a peek at that latest URL in the chat. I think it looks good, but I have not had any experience with the double star globbing for file matching in Crowdin, so can't comment on how effectively that works, but theoretically it should be good. There is one comment there at the end, not on the PR, but on issue 61, where Ben, I think you were imagining a scenario where we would have multiple Crowdin projects per, like we'd have a website Crowdin and a Node docs Crowdin.
Mm-hmm.
That's not what I was picturing, but also I'm
actually,
not.
I think I was being unclear there. It
Okay.
wasn't what I was. It was I wasn't picturing like setting up like an individual Crowdin space for each individual initiative. I think I just did not understand. I don't have a ton of experience setting something up like this, so I think I just didn't understand how we could handle involving every initiative as like a sub directory or whatever, and how that would work within this file. So I think I am on the same page as you. I just didn't quite get the syntax.
Okay, yeah, I'm seeing now that I totally misread your comment.
That's all right.
But yeah, so essentially you just add multiple patterns. The Crowdin file is an array, and every value in the array has a source and a target, or I forget what they're called, but something like that.
Awesome.
So as website comes along, as other things come along, they'll just be another item in the array.
Yeah, which is so exciting.
Yeah,
to me, that's awesome. Right on.
Yes, and I just want to add that I never saw beta configuration in this.
That's awesome.
Yes, it should work fine. I'm sure those double stars should solve everything. So whenever you need add any files, subfolders, everything will be taken into account by CLI or our integration. So there should be no issues. And also, Zik, I see you mentioned that you don't need to create configuration all the time via web interface in Crowdin via integration. You can, of course, you can create Crowdin YAML yourself, put it into your repository, and then just start GitHub integration via Crowdin. You just click Start Integration, and we will consider this Crowdin YAML file configuration you put into repository. So everything should work fine. Yes, very good configuration.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Thanks, Andre. Okay, cool. Did anyone have any more thoughts on the config here? Nope. It's getting more beautiful where Zeke is. That's awesome. Let's go to the getting started doc. This was one I opened a week ago. I think we need, like I mentioned earlier, we need a landing place. We need a place where we, like a first, pointer to how people can get involved in localization groups. And we have people sort of, commenting in our issues list, like, hey, I want to do a translation for Spanish, or I want to do translation for, Italian or whatever. And that's great. And we should continue to like feel that excitement and like get people stoked about helping with localization. But we need to be able to say, hey, we'd like to point, these are the things that it takes to be involved. or just some parameters to keep in mind as you jump into a localization group, things that we've mentioned here. I mean, this could be a place for all the basic stuff, and then you know, things that need to be fielded up front, as Zeke had mentioned with the glossary, and Andre was talking about with the glossary stuff. We should mention, you know, things like that for people to keep in mind as they jump into Crowdin, just to keep those things you know, in mind and present them as being important up front. So if you have any thoughts, if anyone has any thoughts on what should be involved in this getting started document for new localization group members, or people who are who have been involved and just kind of want to see where we are at right now and what the you know, general context is for jumping in with our current working model, please feel free to share your thoughts there. That would be really great. Any thoughts on that before we get to the last issue? Nope. Okay. Well, if you have thoughts on that, please share. We're excited to get people involved. The last issue is number 63, internationalization test plan. This was opened up by Stephen. I think this is assuming he's talking about running tests, a specific set of tests against Node, against like international stuff, and I think like from the previous internationalization group, and I think this might assume that we have something to test yet, and we probably don't. so I think we can consider this one open until we have things to talk about testing, probably with our CI, and as that gets going. So should probably just leave this one open for now. But I wanted to leave a couple minutes at the end, or a minute now. We're hitting the top of the hour. If does anybody have anything that is burning they'd like to talk about, there, you know, that we didn't cover, or any issues that they'd like to talk about?
I have one thing, and that is what versions of Node we want to support, or we want to localize. And I think this is a very challenging problem, and it's one that we decided on initially on Electron to just punt on and just go with the latest version. But I don't think it's feasible for us to pull in every version of Node, the docs for every version of Node. It's, say, 100 files times however many versions times however many languages, and it quickly becomes unwieldy. So I think we're out of time on this call, but there are a couple issues there where this conversation is unfolding, and I would love input from people. I think if we could come up with a clever way of like incrementally, like let's say we have imaginary version, Node version 12.0, and then 12.1 comes out, and 12.1 contains changes to 4 documents within the API. We could have something where we have a directory called 12.0.0, and that has everything, and then 12.1.0 is additive. It's only the 4 new files. 12.1.1 is also additive. That could be problematic too, but I think if we could come up with a technique for sort of only bringing in the content that has changed across versions, then it might not be so overwhelming in terms of the number of files.
I would just say that in my experience with trying to make changes in the docs, and like wanting to make change because there's a lot of things that can be improved, they are open to change. It needs to be incremental, but you just got to go, like, people are willing to have changes happen as long as there's someone to go do the change. So if you're willing to put in the work, people are usually willing to accept it, especially with the docs, because it doesn't get they don't get a ton of love. So I just wanted to add that in. One thing I will say is, I specifically on LTS and current and that stuff, I think once we launch this program, starting at whatever the most recent LTS is for each version, And so we might even say we're only going to localize the most up-to-date LTS. So at that point, 4 will be dropped, 6 will be in maintenance, 8 will be active, like the current LTS I imagine 10 might be, but for the sake of argument, say 6 and 8 will only maintain the 8 LTS. The issue I'm seeing as I'm saying this is what happens when we go to 10 LTS, and then like that's a scary upgrade path. Yeah, I'm worried about that because that's a lot of additional work, and I don't know how reusable that stuff is going to be. That's going to be one of our biggest challenges, I think, is just figuring out that path of upgrade from version to version.
Yeah, also even just moving between minor or patch level versions in terms of the localized content. Like if we have, this was actually happening while we were opening that initial PR, we were on, forget the version number. It changed under our feet while we were working on it. So we were on like 9.10.0 or something like that. And then the next day we came and ran the script again, and we were on 9.10.1, and we had a new directory and a whole new batch of docs. So we need a strategy for this. I don't know what the answer is. It could be like a moving target where it's like, oh, there's a new minor out. There's a new, edge. I guess we don't call it edge, but so let's say 9.11.0 is in the repository, i18n. 9.11.1 comes out. We could just pull the rug out from under ourselves and not have 9.11.0 anymore and only have 9.11.1. But then what would the website do? And the website might have versioned URLs. So it's a big topic. I don't think we have time for it right now, but it is something that we can't put off forever.
I think we could dedicate like a good portion of time to talk about it at our next working group meeting too, and make that a point. So I mean, it's super important. But yeah, great. I'm really glad we got to talk about that here, and we should probably cut it off for folks now. But yeah, that's awesome, Zeke. Thanks for your input on that, and thank you. Everyone's been really great here, and we're excited to continue this conversation. Does anyone have any last quick thoughts before we close out?
Yes, I have regarding versioning. So it should be quite easy because here in Crowdin we have a way to automate translation of duplicated strings. You create a new version, and of course most of strings are the same here, and probably even whole set of files were translated earlier. So it will be very easy to move those translations from one version to another. Yes, we can do another session even next week or tomorrow or on Thursday or on Monday, any day or time you prefer, to discuss that. Yes, we can try. I have several approaches, but I'm not sure what exactly will work for your teams. But yes, let's discuss it in a separate meeting.
That would be awesome.
Okay, cool. I dropped a link in the chat to one of the issues that's kind of talking about this.
Oh, great. Sorry, I missed putting that on the bill there.
No worries. All right, y'all.
All right. Well,
great to see you.
You too. Thanks, Zeke. Thanks, Andre. Thanks, Tierney. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a good day. Have a good night.
Bye.
You too. Bye.
Bye, everybody.